Hi everyone, my name is Tom, and in this video I will talk about the importance of naming in programming. So the idea for this video comes actually from my battles with bad code. Uh, Recently I was working on a project where my job was to implement some new features, but the manager said right away that this will not be so easy as I think. I didn't understand what he was talking about, but when I opened the solution, it was, whoa, what is this? So firstly, there was a ton of projects and the names, if you ask me what the app is doing based on the project names, I would say I don't know what the app is supposed to do. It was so confusing. So finally, I have found a project where I had to implement some new features, and I started to read the classes and the methods in this project. It was terrible. There was a method find L like this one, and the source code that was really bad. I spent hours and hours to investigate what the code is supposed to do. So, and that was the moment where I decided I will make a video about naming because it's the most important thing in programming. Bad name means bad code. In order to share it with you, I just created an example that looks similar. And let us analyze the code and try to understand it. What does it do and what it's supposed to do? So let's see what we have here. Okay, it's a console app that is asking enter person name for search. And if I enter person 1, it says the person 1 does exist in the list. Last ride person 5. Okay, so if we look at the code, imagine that this here is some data from the database and we entered the person 1. The person 1 is in the list. Okay, the person 1 does exist in the list. And last ride is a notification or something. The person 5 was the last person on the ride. The original app was a bit bigger and had more functionality, but it was hard to understand every single line of code. So let us go through every single line of code and try to do some refactoring. What can we do better? For example, in this first part here, we have an input console read line. That means that we are typing something on a keyboard, and this is the data in this input variable. And then we are giving some meaningful name like S and assign the data to this S. I don't know why this is like, I don't know what's the purpose. And then the comments. Search for person user entered. Firstly, it is not searching for the user. And secondly, we don't need this S. We don't need two same variables. We can avoid these comments, especially the wrong comments, by doing some refactoring. Like we can delete this line here and say input from console, for example. It's more meaningful. So if we look at the second part, we have bool result equals find guest list input from console and a very useful comment, true if user exists in the list, false if not. Okay, let's try to understand what this here is actually doing. So in this case, we are finding something and we expect a result true or false. But the name find, it's not right here. It is not just finding something, it is checking if the user exists in the list. So in order to make it better, we can rename the find method and say, for example, check if user exists. Okay. And then it looks much better. Then we can change the variable name and say it's not a result. We expect user exists or user don't exist. We can change this to user exists and copy this here. And the comment is not needed anymore. So if we look at the next part of the code, it says if it now we can understand user exists is true, then write me this here. Or if the user does not exist, write this line. But we can do it better. We can do it more understandable. For example, if we just remove the true here, it's the same. If user exists, that means if user exists, then do this here. And we are copying this here and this here. So input user from console. And if the user does not exist, it is false. And to make it even better, we expect true or false. It means if this is true, then this is false. We don't need this here. We can say else. So if the user exists, the user does exist in the list, else user does not exist in the list. And now let's focus on the last part of code. Okay, here was find the last person because when I did this renaming here, it renamed the comment also. But what does find L means? What does it do? If you look to the comment, it says find the last person that used our service. Okay, so let's try to rename this method. Let's say it is not find L, it will be called get the last person. So this comment is not needed anymore. The code looks so much better and more understandable like this before. If we look to our code, we just read it now. Okay, input from console. We check if the user exists. If it exists, then write down does exist in the list. If it's not the case, then the user does not exist in the list. And then get me the last person from the guest list and write it down, write his name down. It is more readable like the one before because these are meaningful names. It is very important to give a method and meaningful name so that the other developer can understand it. You don't write names for the compiler or for the machine. You write the code for the next developer. The next developer that can be you in 2 years maybe, and you won't be able to read your own code. Trust me. So let's try to analyze these two methods. Check if user exists and get the last person. At some time, someone, I don't know why, wrote these methods, and we will now analyze them to make them better. The same thing here, renamed the find word from the comment. Uh, okay, the comment says find guest from list. There is a list and there is a string s. In this case, it means we want to find the person or the person name. We can rename this s to some meaningful and say person name. So we now have the list and we have the person name. This list can be also renamed, but let's pretend it's okay or not. We just rename it to guest list. So if we analyze the for each loop, it goes through every x guest, and if the name is equals the person name we are searching for, then the found item will be populated with the name. And if there is another name, person 1 and person 1, it will use the last because it will found two names and the last wins. The next thing, we don't need this continue here because it's not it's nothing happening here actually. And then if found item is not empty anymore, then return true. That means user exists, else return false. Okay, let's try to refactor it. For example, we can define a new method, found persons equals, we look in the guest list where we can find customer with customer name that equals person name. So if you can see, we will have an innumerable guest, a list of guests with this name. And the thing we have to do is return found customers, found persons, any. That means, is there any found person with this name? If it's true, okay, the user exists. If it falls, the user does not exist. It doesn't bother if there are 2, 3, 5, or 10 persons with the same name in the list. It just says, okay, there is a user that is existing. So now we can delete this and we have our method simplified. I don't want to talk about why is that implemented, but it was doing its job. So let us check the last method, get the last person from guest list. So if we look to the methods, it says count one, count total count of guests in the list, and iterate through every guest. And if the count equals count one, that means this is the last object in the guest list. It then returns the guest. And if we have luck, it won't jump to return null. In this case, the L dot name would be null and our app would crash. So in order to fix this, we can write it like var um, var var last guest equals guest list last, and then return the last guest. So now we have our new method. It is very simple, it's readable. Last means last, and we should use the Microsoft things every time we can, because these people are creating something for developers. We don't need to invent something that is already invented for us. So there are a few more things that we can do here. For example, this L doesn't mean anything. We can do some renaming here and say it's the last person and then the last person name. Then we can do the string interpolation. We can just write the dollar sign here, and then we can just put this variable at this place. It's called the string interpolation. The same thing we can do here. It's more readable. You don't have to worry about the name and the positions and so on. You just write your variable at this place and it will be okay. The same thing here, string interpolation, and it looks much better. And then we can do some fancy stuff and convert this in this way and say if the user exists, yes, true, this is the true side and this is the false side. If the user exists, write this. If it does not, write this here. It's an option too. You can use what is better for you. So the last thing, when we know that we are working for a taxi service, we know that the taxi service doesn't have guests, it has customers. And I would say this is wrong in this place. So I will rename it to customer. And then I have the customers. And I have check if customer exists. And exists. If the customer exists in the list. If does not, it does not exist in the list. And then get the last customer and the last customer. And then we have to adapt these methods here. Check if the customer in the list. And then we have customers, and we are searching for customer name. In this method also, we are searching in the customers list. And this is found customers and last customers on ride. So it looks nice now. We have our customers, we have our input from console, customer exists or not, and then the last customer, and we write his name. Looks pretty good. So we are done with this small tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you noticed the difference between this code and the first original code. So don't forget to give meaningful names to your functions, methods, and projects. It is very important. As a developer, your job is to read lots of code and write code. The code you write today, maybe you will read tomorrow. It's very important that it's meaningful. You don't read a book with random letters. You read a book by its titles, by its sentences, and some order. It's in programming, it's the same. You as developer, you can choose to write bad, not understandable code, or you can choose to write something that others can understand because you write for other developers, not for the machine. The machine doesn't care. And there is a great quote from Martin Fowler. It's a British software engineer and author of some books. He says, any fool can write code that a computer can understand. Good programmers write code that humans can understand. Remember that. If you have any suggestions, comments, questions, or anything else, you can write comments below, you can contact me, and if you think I should record some other videos, you can tell me what topic you are interested in, and I will give my best. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Bye.